Welcome to Community Voices with your host, Terrence Lauchie. This radio roundtable features community, business, and religious leaders that discuss current events and topics that impact our urban community. If you would like to be a guest or if you have a suggested topic, contact the station today at 616-259-7342. Now, into the program.
Greetings and welcome back to another edition of Community Voices. I'm Terrence Lauchie, and you are tuned into 91.9 FM, The People's Choice. We have a great opportunity today. We are moving into the heat, as they would say, of this election 2024. And I've got some special guests that will help to give us some information about the importance of the vote, but then also some perspective. I mean, everybody's entitled to opinion and perspective. And so today we're just going to share a couple of those with two guests. One, of course, who's not new to this area nor to the station is Congresswoman Hillary Scholten. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be back.
Well, I'm glad you're back. I know that the last time you were here, we were talking about registering to vote.
Yep.
Now we're talking about people getting out to vote.
Actually voting. It's happening. It's happening right now.
That's right.
Election in 4 days and early voting well underway.
Sure. Both this subject and this district or this area is near and dear to you.
Absolutely.
So much so that you want to share it with some of your fellow constituents or fellow workers in this field. So introduce our guest. I'm honored to have you, and then I'd like for you to have the honor to introduce our guest.
Absolutely. Well, we are so honored to have Ranking Member Greg Meeks here from the great state of New York, formerly the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. We feel that when we're back in the majority, he will be chairman once again. But currently, ranking member on the House Foreign Affairs Committee and another high and very powerful member on the House Financial Services Committee, and a powerful member of the Congressional Black Caucus as well. He is a champion for so many of us new members. He's been a great mentor to me and so many of my colleagues. We serve together in the New Democratic Coalition, and it's just such an honor to have him here in Grand Rapids. Mr. Meeks, you want to say a few words?
It's fantastic to be with you, and fantastic to be here in the great state of Michigan, but especially with Congresswoman Scholten, because, I also chair the Congressional Black Caucus's Political Action Committee.
Okay.
And when you look at members come in, you can tell where their heart is and where they're focused. And I know that there's many individuals of color that's in her district that prior to her had no visitations, had no real representations, had no one that was pushing for them. And when we just sat back and observed her diligence and her focus to try to make sure that everyone in her district was represented, we know how significant and important it is to have her return to be a part of the Democratic House majority. She's in the minority now, and I know she's been something that's unprecedented when making sure that resources get into the black community.
Sure.
And I can just only imagine what she will be able to do once we take back the majority and the resources increase.
Well, Congressman Meeks, thank you so much for being here. It's a privilege to meet you and to even hear you make this type of endorsement. I think you guys will have an opportunity to kind of push the interest meter of why we're here and why it's important for us to even get out and vote. This election, like many elections, I understand there are 31 elections worldwide taking place.
It's incredible.
During this season,
Yeah.
worldwide, not just the United States of America, not just in our state or just in our country, but around the world. Talk a little bit about the basics, because our listening audience is very diverse in age, demographics.
Yeah.
Some seniors are listening and they know the struggle. They know that there were lives lost just to get the right to vote, just to be able to have the equal opportunity to express our concern for political candidates. And then there are younger people who are probably frustrated with what they've seen and experienced, and even some youngers who don't even know the significance or the importance. So if we look at those three segments, now let's talk to all three of them. Let's talk to the black constituency and let's talk to the non-black constituency that would benefit from taking advantage of this opportunity, this moment in time, to make some change or to drive home our desires.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm happy to speak briefly, especially at what we've been doing to expand voting rights here in Michigan and why that matters. Mr. Meeks, of course, can speak, from the Congressional Black Caucus, but we are honored to have the ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee here. So speaking, internationally to what, we as a country have to show and demonstrate about the democratic process. So, I'm speaking here as the first woman in history to hold this seat in Congress, the right to vote was not granted right when we signed the Declaration of Independence to women or to Black individuals here in the United States of America. It's something we had to fight for, and many, you're right, died for that right. Exercising that right and making sure that no one, no eligible person, who is able to vote is infringed from casting that ability to vote. We've seen, just blatant attempts in Congress to try to cut that vote.
Sure.
Even very recently, when we were trying to get our continuing resolution passed, and Republicans in the House majority tried to attach a restrictive voting rights bill to that continuing resolution under the guise of, saying, well, we're going to prevent undocumented immigrants from voting. That's already illegal in the United States of America. There are crimes for it. When and if someone even tries to vote and they're not lawfully in this country, they're prosecuted. Yeah. But what the bill, we were just dealing with this in September, was introduced. What it would have done is make it so that senior citizens could not have used their retirement card. Veterans could not have used
as far as ID.
their ID. Yeah, their ID. Veterans could not have used their veteran identification card, disenfranchising so many individuals. You would have had to go back and get a birth certificate from where you were born in order to prove that you were born in the United States of America. Here in Michigan, we're proud that so many people came up during the Great Migration and settled here in Michigan. Many people, have to think long and hard. What county was I born in again? Go back and try to find and make contact there. Can you imagine trying to go through all of those hurdles just to cast your vote in a home that you've lived in for decades? Yeah. So those are the types of battles that we're still fighting to this day. I was proud, of course, to cast my vote against that and hold strong to make sure that we could keep the government from shutting down while still making sure that individuals can cast their vote.
I think it's important for us to even know that these are the things that are at risk. I had the privilege, and I'd love for you to pipe in on this, because as the Black Caucus former chair, am I correct, of the Black Caucus?
The Political Action Committee.
Political Action Committee. You can speak to the emotional, I would say, impact of having lived through the 60s, 70s, the 80s, the 90s. I had a tour just recently to Selma, Alabama, Montgomery first, and then to Selma, and we actually walked the Pettus Bridge. We had an opportunity to walk through the various elements of our history relating to voters' rights. Speak to that and speak to your passion with wanting to represent.
Again, this is why it's important for Hillary to be reelected, because it's going to take all of us to get this done. It's going to take Democrats to make sure that we're in the majority. Once we're in the majority and Hakeem Jeffries becomes the Speaker, first African-American Speaker of the House of Representatives, that we will finally be able to pass the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act. Because what we otherwise, if we don't win and the other guy wins in the White House, then we will be, in 2025, we will be living under Project 2025. Mm-hmm. And if you look at what Project 2025, what it's setting out to take rights away from individuals. We talk about the rights to vote. It is trying to make it more difficult. And you can look at all across the nation, they want to make it more difficult, particularly for people of color to vote, but for all Americans to vote. And that's not the way that we should be going. It is, you said you just, went to visit Edmund Pettus Bridge, which when John Lewis was alive, we always paid going to a pilgrimage there. Mm-hmm. I just came back from Greensboro, North Carolina, at the Civil Rights Museum there. and looking at what took place and how there was poll taxes and other obstacles that were put in the way, and the similarities that we see that's being articulated by the MAGA Republicans today, the bill that they're trying to block. This whole thing about just moving everything to the states' rights. Well, we saw that happen before after the elections of 1860, actually. And in that 1860 election, because of the results of that election, they tried to, there was the southern states at that time, and some of the states wanted to get themselves removed from the Union.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of similar to what's taking place today. And so that's at stake. You can't take it for granted. You talk about what took place before. It's happened before.
Yeah.
And so we've got to make sure that we're joining hands with others, with all of Americans, to make sure that we don't go back, that we go forward, that we don't want to. America currently is the greatest country in the world. But we don't want to go back, say make America great again, go back to when we had segregation, go back to when Jim Crow, go back to when women did not have the right to vote, go back to when African Americans didn't have the right to vote, go back to when we put people into concentration camps. No, we don't want to go back. We want to go forward. This is the greatest country in the world, and it is the leader of the world. And if we're going to lead the world, we've got to show, to me, what is great about America now as we celebrate on January 20th. We'll be celebrating the life and times of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., where he said that he had a dream that one day we'll be judging a person by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. We can make that dream reality. Re-elect Hillary to the United States House of Representatives.
You're passionate.
I'm passionate about
get
it.
it.
That's how important, and it starts locally. That's how important this is.
Well, when you started talking about America being great, something just rose up inside of me because I've had a chance to do some travel, and no matter where I've traveled around the world, I've been to more than 9 countries, and everywhere I've gone, people are people. But there is no place like home. There is no place like being here. And there are people who will speak negatively about being an American or being in America. There's some folks who want to go back to Africa. We've got friends and family in Africa. They say, well, if you came, we wouldn't know where to put you because we have a unique experience as Black Americans. I'm sure the white Americans who understand this plight and this experience and this journey has also been able to put some revelation behind what makes America great. Those things that you talked about that are being overturned or rolled back and pushed back, they won't make America great again. If anything, it'll make America worse than what it has been. And I'm not a very political person. I listen to all sides of the house. I listen to, all perspectives. But when it comes time to make the decision, my faith literally plays a very significant part in that, and my belief in God and the orchestration of people being in the office. We talked a little bit about that, how as a woman of faith, you stand on the word of God. You stand on making decisions that have to do with what's right and righteous in God's eyes, as opposed to privilege, personal choice and decision, or maybe even some of the debauchery that we're experiencing.
That's exactly right. And, we were so honored to have Reverend and Senator Raphael Warnock here as a special guest at the NAACP dinner as well. And, he gave a very fiery speech about voting rights in this election and what's at stake. And some people, kind of ruffled their feathers. They said, we don't want to get into politics and the partisanship. And he said, we're not talking about partisanship here. We're talking about voting rights. Absolutely. We're talking about the future of our democracy. And, we're not going to be intimidated or bullied into calling out, who is fighting for those things and who is working against those things, right? We can't be so afraid to talk about the policies which are political and shape our lives and our futures. For women, me personally, Mr. Meeks' daughters and granddaughters, our actual bodies, right? And our health. And, the women's health care is just so front and center this election. And we think about, what it's going to take to get that message out. Well, we have to talk about who is fighting to protect it and who is fighting to take us back
Sure.
an entire generation.
Well, let's focus on that. Let's focus
Yeah.
on the fact that there are individuals who have their perspectives and they do represent the voice of the unheard or the
Yep.
people that need to be a part of it. Let's talk about the demographic impact of either party in this
Yeah.
election.
Yeah.
There's an impact that the demographics of a city such as
Absolutely.
Grand Rapids
Yeah.
feels.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about that.
Let me just tell you this. Earlier today, I was at the University of Michigan Hospital with the Congresswoman.
One of the local.
Yeah.
One of the local here.
Southwest. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm. Yep.
And it wasn't about politics. We walked, had a table of health experts talking about maternal care, talking about how do we make sure that we reach people in the communities of which they come from, and talk about how we improve health, despite whether you are poor or rich, because it should not be where you get health care, should not be a privilege for a few. It should be the right of all of us. And I bring that up because it's so significant and important when we hear the Speaker Johnson talking recently about what the House of Representatives would do under his and their leadership in regards to the Affordable Care Act.
Right.
And we know
Another reversal.
another reversal.
Yeah.
And who will that significantly affect? The least of these, those that can't afford to have the private insurance that they want to put on everybody. They want to talking about substantial cuts that will take place in areas like Medicare and Medicaid.
Sure.
The cuts, to make sure that we cannot negotiate the cost of prescription drugs. With Hillary working and along with the President Biden and Vice President Harris, we were able to make sure that there was a cap of $35 on the cost for insulin. And we need to go to the next step to make sure it's not just for seniors, but it's for everybody. We've got to move forward in that regard. That's why it's important. And guess what? I've seen them work on both sides of the aisle if you want to stand on, do the right thing, because that's what this is all about.
And that's really what I think people need to hear,
It's
too.
people over politics. She's ready to work with everybody.
Because the confusion is in historic information. The history tells us, there's a party who supports this and a party who supports that.
Yeah.
But then history also tells us that there's a marginalized people that suffers on both sides, in both instances. And when we begin to address what the suffrage actually is, it helps to clarify who we should be voting for.
Yeah.
As a pastor, I never tell people who to vote for. I always tell people exercise your right to vote.
Yeah.
You do the research, you find out, you talk to these candidates, you talk to people who currently represent you in your communities, and you find out where they stand on issues. And I'm saying that, publicly so that those who are listening will know, hey, maybe I better exercise this right to vote. Because there's some people throwing up their hands.
Yep.
Because of the arguments and because of all the mudslinging. And every ad has a tendency to be about what the other person's not doing as opposed to what they are doing.
Yep, that's exactly right. And I my closing ad of the cycle is hoping to address just that. It's talking about my bipartisanship and the work that I have done in the community.
Sure.
It is.
And I'd rather hear that than
exactly
how bad the opponent is.
Because people don't necessarily know if they can trust that. But so it's talking about the resources that we've helped bring back to the community. Job skills training programs. Grants to cure violence. Here in the city, which has
partnering with the Urban
League. Yeah, exactly. These are ways that we have been showing up in the community, and not just peppered with talking points and hyperbole, but actual demonstrable results that we have been. Yep. And
well, you're being modest too, because I understand that there's some other projects that you've worked on and helping to infuse funds into the communities that would not have typically had that. Talk a little bit about that. Feel free so that the listeners can hear.
Well, I think listen, especially when we're talking about the African American community, this is true nationwide, but I hear it time and time again here in West Michigan. Politicians show up the last 2 weeks of the election and they're like, give me your vote. They make all kinds of promises and then you don't see them again.
Right.
I made a decided effort to show up from day one, even before I was sworn in. My very first stop after I realized that I had won in my official capacity was to Muskegon Heights High School. Deeply, they were in a receivership at that point, drowning in debt. Muskegon Heights is experiencing a lot of, challenges right now, coming out around the bend. For those of you listening who don't know, I'm not just Grand Rapids. My district goes all the way out to the Lakeshore, Muskegon, and Muskegon Heights, including that I-96 and Grand River corridor, right along there. And it is, it's essential that people who have not been gotten in attention of their representative, right? Their taxpayer dollars go to the federal government just like everybody else's, right? They deserve to have someone who's going to fight for those resources to come back and do the work in our community. So making sure we're showing up there. Again, we got the resources to the Urban League for their youth center. We got
that project is underway.
It is. Yep. We broke ground and we got resources allocated in this round of funding too for Cure Violence and Cherry Health as well. We're helping them to build a low-income housing unit for individuals that they serve who are coming out of incarceration and looking for housing back home here. Other low-income housing projects. Childcare. We're sitting here at IFF. We got a huge grant for their new early childhood learning center, which is happening over in Boston Square. It's a huge barrier to so many individuals who are looking, to go back to work or even go to a doctor's appointment or go back to school. So those are
partnership and collaboration and also accountability.
Yeah.
And I can appreciate your accountability. This isn't the first time you've sat at this microphone, and I think it's commendable that you're willing to come back and continue to keep the dialogue open.
Yeah.
At some point, maybe we'll be able to take some calls and questions.
I'd be happy to do that. Yeah.
In the future, we're in the process of getting those
great.
Technologies in place to where you can engage.
I'd be so happy to do that.
That's what makes it community voices.
Yeah.
And not just one person's voice.
Exactly.
We've only got a few minutes left, and I want to hear from Congressman Meeks. It's not every day you get a chance to sit
absolutely
with such royalty.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm here because of the Congresswoman.
I know that, but I want to commend both of you all for your service.
Let me just say this. When I talked about this is, I live by these words of Dr. King. And when you look at Hillary, it's the content of her character. All of the issues that you've heard her talk about, it's good for people. She's not talking politics. She's talking health care. She's talking access to resources. She's talking to make sure that she's in the communities, on the ground. That's how not waiting 2 weeks before an election, when the election, but she's there. One of the first stops she made after she got elected. And as chair of the CBC PAC, we don't endorse everybody and anybody.
Right.
We endorse people based upon the content of their character and the actions that they put out. And that's exactly what she has done. She's the right person at the right time for an important time in our history to get reelected. And it is important if, in fact, we want to continue to move forward to become a more perfect union.
Yeah.
And it is. You talk about the Democratic caucus, we are the most diverse caucus in the history of the United States of America. That's moving forward. That's not going back to where Congress used to look 25, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago.
Yeah.
That's what I am focused on, because I want to make sure that all of God's children, all of us, are being able to move forward and have the opportunity to enjoy this American dream. Mention that I am the former chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. The world looks at us.
Oh, absolutely.
The world. No matter where I go, no matter who I talk to, they're asking and they're concerned about this election. And it starts on the congressional level. The legislative branch is really important. We've got to make sure that, we got to elect the executive branch. Now, I can't leave that. But once the executive branch is elected, it has to have a Congress, a legislative branch that can help make those things reality.
And move things through
and
the
move
process.
it through.
Yeah.
We are the ones on the House side, and that's why I got to, just want to make that nothing really gets on our president's desk if it's not passed through the House first.
Exactly.
And so we've got to make sure that we got the right people in the House.
Right. And it gets even more personal because, and this is the last thing I wanted to bring up and have us address. We've got about less than 5 minutes left. The black male vote, because that's a topic of conversation right now. The black male vote. I've got sons. I do have a daughter, but I have sons and a son-in-law. I've got grandsons, and I want them to understand or be able to see the significance and the importance of our presence in this country, not as slaves, not as former enslaved people, not as the incarcerated population, not as the recidivism rate, but as a voice in America. That vote is obviously important because now we're being targeted.
It's crucial. It's crucial.
Now look, here's what we're focused on in the House. We want to make sure that we are closing the wealth gap. We want to make sure that there's opportunities for you and black men and their families to own homes. That's the first progress in reducing the wealth gap. We want to make sure that folks have the opportunity to get an education, whether it be academic or vocational. I utilize the theme of the 3 E's. Especially when you want to talk about empowering a community and empowering the black male. Well, it's 3 things: education and economics, the opportunity to have a good job, not a so-called black job that the former president was talking about, but a good job. Economics and education equals empowerment. So this is how we can help empower the black man and the black family moving forward in that regards. And that's exactly what the Congresswoman is doing and moving forward. So that vote, that black vote, and let me just, black male vote, and let me just say this, because I've been hearing it, I know they're going to come out to vote. I think that some people, and Donald Trump, talks about it at times because he doesn't want them really to vote.
Absolutely. It's
but I've gone around this country, and the truth of the matter is, I think that you will see that the turnout of black men and the vote for Democrats across the board, not just because they're Democrats, but because what we stand for, because what we understand, how to make sure that we are empowering people is tremendously important and on the top of our agenda. Because guess what? That's not just good for the black man. That's good for all of America. That's good to make sure that we are moving forward and that we are having and moving toward a more perfect union. That's why we need to make sure that we have individuals that are elected to Congress. I tell everyone, and the reason why I stay on this is important. I tell people most of the times, vote from the bottom up. Because as from the top down. Because you see too many times there's a drop off. That's why you see the elections. During a presidential, sometimes it's higher, but you're not looking at what is happening, on the bottom. We've got to vote from the locally. That's important.
Absolutely.
Vote from the bottom up.
Sure.
Because that's where, you can't have a tree without strong roots. And they create the roots. She creates the opportunities for a better life and a better tomorrow for all of us in our communities and communities around the Western Michigan.
I think you've got a great advocate here.
We're very, very honored to have him. And
Lots
it's
of
been
passion.
Such an honor to have the CBC's endorsement. It means so much, as partners in this work because, what happens here in Grand Rapids to, our black community in particular who have been overlooked so often. We're seeing incredible economic growth here. That has not been equal across the gender spectrum, across the racial spectrum, across the socioeconomic spectrum. Grand Rapids in the last 10 years has frequently been ranked one of the worst cities in America to be black. We need to change that. We have to change that. And on the House Small Business Committee, we are working to address some of those disparities. We helped to launch a BIPOC Chamber of Commerce in Muskegon. We're working closely with our BIPOC chambers here in West Michigan, in Grand Rapids in particular as well, so that we can help individuals who want to start and grow a small business but have a hard time doing that in a place like Grand Rapids, where you only see a certain few families' names on buildings. schools, that they have an opportunity to start those small businesses and grow that generational wealth as well. So, as Chairman Meeks said, making those issues local, right? You hear the top of the ticket talking about it. I believe them way more than I believe Trump, who gave 99% of the tax benefits to the top 1%. I believe, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz for their opportunity economy, their agenda. And we are helping to implement it here on the ground. And the results speak for themselves in the things that we've been able to do. I'm so proud, not just to be running on promises of a campaign in the future, but a strong record of what we've been able to accomplish in the last 2 years.
And the record speaks for itself.
Thank
Well,
you.
Congresswoman Hillary, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Congressman Meeks, thank you so much. I appreciate the privilege, the opportunity to make history.
Thank you.
I'm honored to be able to just make this available to our people. It will air before the election, so you have an opportunity to make some choices and decisions and get out and vote. Amen.
Vote.
You
Listen.
say that because when we vote, we
win.
win.
All right. You've been listening to Community Voices on 91.9 FM, The People's Choice. I'm Terrence Lachey, and thank you so much for tuning in again.
Been listening to Community Voices with your host, Terrence Lachey. Community Voices can be heard every Friday at 12 noon. This radio roundtable features community, business, and religious leaders that discuss current events and topics that impact our urban community. If you would like to be a guest, or if you have a suggested topic, contact the station today at 616-259-7342. Until next week, let your voice be heard in the community.